that game. So I walked out in the field just as jovial as I could be. I walked over and started joking with the marshals. I was like, all right, first off, because I wanted to, now, internally, I took that fight very serious. He was a serious, hard opponent, and I was concerned about being able to win that fight. But I wanted to come out to him thinking and show to him, this is no big deal. You can get all excited you want to hit you anyway. All part of the game. And then we closed and we each threw a shot and double killed on the first shot. And I got up laughing and I just looked down and said, I thought we weren't doing single one shots. And then his brain was gone. And the rest of the fight was easy. So it's all playing that game. It's the same thing in the middle of the fight. When you're fighting with someone, anytime you can manipulate, get into your opponent's head, anticipate what they're going to do. And a big part of that just comes from doing a lot of fighting. Being able to anticipate what your opponent's going to do, how they're going to react to what you do. If you can figure that out ahead of time, it gives you a bigger advantage. Even if you can't figure that out ahead of time, you can do a lot of probing in the fight to figure out how your opponent's going to react. It can be very, very simple stuff. One of the simplest things and one of the more successful things that I do is I throw a flat snap. Just a plain, simple, fast as I can make it, straight for the eyes, flat snap. And I'm not expecting the guy to die to it on the first one. I'm expecting him to block it. But what I'm looking for is I want to see how he blocks it. And once I get that flash, that picture in my head, I saw how that block went, the next one I can change the angle on. So as long as I've gotten his real honest reaction, this is how he's going to react to a flat snap, now I can identify where I can miss his block. And so it's a very simple form of manipulation. I'm making him show me how he blocks so I can figure out how not to block my shot. There's a lot of things you can do with range and disguising what you do. There's a lot of things you can do with your body language. Sometimes I'll walk out into a fight, like for instance, very beat up fights, so I'll just walk in and relaxed, tired old man thing. You know, you'll see me walk out to the field because I walk out to the field. You know, nothing to worry about. There are times when you can look at your opponent and you can tell your opponent absolutely knows they can beat you, or your opponent absolutely knows they're going to lose the fight. It doesn't matter that much which way they go with that. What matters is whether or not you can figure out where their head's at, because you can use that. The guy who's absolutely convinced he's going to win that fight can be an advantage. He's going to be overconfident. You can use that against him in the fight. You can identify that in your opponent. The guy that's convinced himself he's going to lose the fight is probably right. It doesn't matter how good they are. If you convince yourself that you're going to lose a fight, even if it's not consciously, even if it's in the back of your head someplace, if you believe you're going to lose that fight, you're probably right.
And I've been victim to all of this, is what he's saying. I can give a good example. First round, when the final did. So I come out, it's a three-way final, it's me and Patrick. I'm already wearing flat snap, I'm hyped up. He walks out, walks right over to me and goes, Ragnar, I'm so glad I'm fighting in the finals. You know, I've been fighting for 32 years, it's finally here. And all my anger went away. And then he turns around going,
and then what did he throw? Three flat snaps in a row.
Well, the last one, yeah. I didn't expect the third one. But, yeah.
Yeah, and when I throw those multiple flat snaps, in my mind, I take a mental picture of my low landing and where the block was. And so they look, from the outside, like three flat snaps, but every one of them is actually a little different. I'm trying to find the angle that's going to miss that block. So I'm testing my opponent to see where his block is.
And on the other end, when I fight him in practice and he throws the flat snap, I'll try to block it with my sword because I know he wants to see my shield, and then the game stops.
Yeah.
This is before.
One of the big things about lying to your opponent all the time is you got to be really careful about believing your opponent.
Yeah.
Especially the good ones. That's where you got to go see what they do in the fight that counts.
Like any good lie, you have to keep lying about it.
Yeah, or, change your lie. What was an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine dealing with one of the Cardassians. And somebody told tells him the story of the boy who cried wolf. And his response was, the lesson he learned from that was never tell the same lie twice. So, I'll walk out. I had a fight recently with Collegium. Super high energy. All over the place. Real athletic. He was all in. I walked out on the field and just, yeah, okay. Do this. And at Leon, he closed with me. And as soon as he got just outside of range, I went after him. And he didn't know what happened. He was expecting me to kind of lay back, be defensive, and I just went straight in and jumped in his shorts. And before he figured out that he wasn't in the fight he had planned, I hit him. And I saved myself a lot of energy because I'm basically lazy and old and have bad knees, so I don't run all over the place. So just you can't overstate how important the mental side of combat, no matter what kind of combat you're doing, is, and getting into your opponent's head. If you get into somebody's head and camp out there, it's very. And I've been there. I've been, for years and years. Man, I could not beat Dietrich to save my life. And a big part of the problem is I would go out and fight Dietrich, and somewhere back in here, I knew already that I had lost. And I've had fighters, and it's much easier to get people to do that after you get a belt or you get a crown. People volunteer to let you camp in their head.
Give you the deed.
Sir Thorfinn, for probably 3 years, I used the same shot to kill him 20 times a week. It was just so embedded in his head that he just couldn't do anything about it. It doesn't work anymore, but every now and then I have to throw that shot at him because it's still back there somewhere. It just throws him off a little bit, He'll relax a little bit because now what he does is he closes that shot so that I can't hit it once he figured out where it was really coming from. And so he puts himself in a guard position to keep me from throwing that. So when he drifts out of that, I'll throw it because it makes him go back there, but it also makes him think about it. He just gets a little bit into his head. And I'm helping him. Eventually he'll get that completely figured out. He's actually pretty well now. That shot doesn't. I don't know if I've killed him with that shot in the last 2 years, but he still thinks about it. And that's the important thing. So a lot of the feints and fakes that I throw in a fight are really dependent on who I'm fighting. If I'm fighting a new fighter versus I'm fighting Duke so-and-so, the fakes are very, very different fakes. And one of the things, and it takes a little bit of fighting experience, you need to be able to analyze, at some level, you need to be able to analyze your opponent. And that will get better as time goes on. The more experience you have, the easier it will be to analyze your opponent. But if I go out against a brand new fighter and I do that, they're going to stare at me and not know I didn't. They didn't see a thing. All they knew is the sword. It came at me. They know nothing. So fast little feints work against fast fighters. If you got a new fighter who doesn't have that experience, and doesn't have that mental speed in the fight, and you want to throw a fake, you have to throw a fake. You got to say, hey, look, see? I'm going to hit you in the leg to get their attention. And even then, you may not get their attention. The brand new fighters will just, you'll be doing this, I'm faking it, and they won't react to it. They have no idea what you're doing. All they know is they want to chop your head off.
They're
they
not
just
watching you.
They don't even care about your attack. They don't know. Those are the ones that will screw you up. So, the faster the fighter, the mentally faster, more experienced the fighter is, the more subtle your feints have to be. To the point where feints happen in fights that even to a trained person outside the fight, it's easy to miss the feints because they're so quick and they're so small. Sometimes even I remember fighting about 2 years ago, fighting Duke Sean from Artemisia, and he hit me flat snap upside the head, and it hurt me. In order for him to do that, I moved my shield over here. And I knew I had done it. I moved my shield out of the way so he could hit me. And I had to stop and go, why did I do that? Something made me, he did something that made me do that. And I had to go back and figure out what he did to make me hit the shield. look at is the shots that you throw. If you're throwing feints that are unrelated to your fight, it's going to be very hard to make your opponent believe them. So you need to make your feints look like your shots. So if you always fight from here and you're throwing a feint that starts from here, it doesn't look like your fight, and you're in a different position than you're normally in, it's hard to sell that to your opponent because now you just keep them up to doing something weird. So I want to throw, if I'm going to throw a feint, I want it to look like my flat snap, the initiation of my flat snap. If I'm going to throw something different, I want to get that far and convince them that I'm coming onside. If I throw something that doesn't look anything like the shot I throw, I'll throw a crossing. This was the third killing my wife. All it is I'm actually putting my hand across my body before rotation, so the rotation happens over here. So the shot's actually approaching their helmet from their sword side. And what happens is your opponent thinks you're throwing this, when really you're throwing this. They're in the shield in front of their face, and doesn't block the head at all with the shot. Very simple misdirection. Initially, it looks like that, looks like that. The shot's really big. You've got difference in approach angles because it's the shield and the helmet. I throw that all the time. Anybody who's seen me fight a lot, pretty familiar with that shot. So I throw a fake that goes right there. Not intended to hit them, but I want it to be believable. My fake is going to be as close to their helmet as I can get it. I don't want to hit it, preferably, because that's going to slow me down. But I want them to believe my attack. They believe that attack, they block it. If you really, really watch my attack, you'll see that I'm coming past their head, rotating through flat, even if I landed with a shot. Because I'm really setting up to come right there. So you want to make anything you're doing to manipulate your opponent has to be believable. And so you want to base it off that. There are some real big, wild things you can do against them, especially the best people for fake shots, honestly, are intermediate fighters. New fighters don't notice you're doing anything. Really good fighters are really hard to deceive. The guys in the middle, you can just have fun with.
You're reacting there.
Yeah. New fighters react to nothing. Guys in the middle react to everything. Really good fighters don't react because they know it's okay.
A lot of times.
They know you're lying.
A really experienced guy, they just,
Too tired to move.
I'm just going to shift my foot.
Everything I do is lying to you. Pretty much.
Which in and of itself is a lie.
It's not really true because really my favorite thing is to sit and focus and look for you to give me something. So my first choice is to let you decide how you want me to hit you. My second choice is to make you give me something.
He said I have some more.
The attitude you take when you walk into the fight, another thing you can use to manipulate your opponent. First off, you need to get control of what you're doing in the fight. And the whole mental side of that, I have, in a serious fight, I have a kind of a ritual that I go through that gets my brain in the right place to really fight, that makes me focus. And that's a very different subject, but very valuable thing. Being in the right mental space when you come into a fight is very, very important and can be very elusive. Some people do it naturally. They just walk onto the field, never give it a second thought. Their brain is there, and they're natural fighters. That has never been me. I have struggled through lots of tourney choke, and I have and it's a subtle thing, and in a serious fight I do my salutes. We're used to that. That's part of the ritual that puts my brain there. At the end of the fight, I give the last salute to my opponent, and if you watch me fight in the crowd, you'll see me give the salute, and you'll see me tap top of my shield punch. And it's the mental cue for me.
That's the game on.
It's just that's click, game on, brain's focused.
I don't know why.
The rest of the world goes away.
If I don't tap my shield,
Yep. It's whatever works for you. Different people have different rituals. Then I have to figure out how I'm going to deal with my opponent. If he's really hyper and going to come at me, or if he's really laid back, and you need to figure that out so you can figure out what you want to tell him. Yeah, do I want him thinking I'm coming at him, or do I want him thinking I'm a little worried, sit back here and wait for him, and now he's going to come charging in at me, and now I'm coming at him. Because I wasn't really being defensive. I was just waiting for him to make that close and looking for him to give me something when he closes. Because you're always most vulnerable when you try to move like that, especially if you're trying to move fast. If you're one of those people, I want to jump into my opponent. It's really hard to jump into your opponent and not expose things. There's also some things you can do. Different people like to fight different ranges. My ideal, if you ever fight me where you probably don't want to be, what we call B range, right here, I can hit every part of him with either the front blade or false blade of my sword. Everything is in target. Every option is there. So if he'll plant right in front of me, I'll camp here all day. I love it. It's not the best place to fight against me. Now, he knows that. He doesn't want to be there. So he's going to stand out of range. But he's a range fighter. He wants to fight at the end of his range and stay out of mine as much as possible and snipe at me. So I don't want to snipe at him. I need him to get close to him. But he's not doing it willingly. I've got to trick him. So, just a faint snipe. You can't keep farming. Okay. Go again. Just make a single step coming in.
He just doesn't want to hit you in the head without your helmet on.
That's why it's not on.
So he makes a feint at me. I don't want to be a range. Step out. I don't want to be a range. Step out. I really want to be in range. When his foot comes off the ground, and he's already, because I've trained him, I've taught him that when he tries to close with me, I'm going to try and step out of range. Once I think he believes that, do the opposite. Same thing, if he wants to stay out of my range, I got to trick him into range. So I can train him by making small advances and stopping, small advances and stopping, and then big advance, try and catch him off guard. If he's quick, it's not going to work. Or I don't chase people. I don't like chasing people. It opens things up.
Ragnar says otherwise.
I say don't walk in going, Patrick never takes more than 3 steps.
Lying to you.
No more than stop.
Now again, once you figure out that your opponent has something analyzed, that's when you have to change it. Any fighter that I know is analyzing my fight, I think, what has he analyzed and what will he not expect? And I play that game with Kjartan a lot because he's really into analyzing my fight, but he lets me know what he's analyzing, so I mess
I let you know what's
So on the quick closing thing, one of the things, what I do most of the time if I really want to close with somebody is I just march them down. So my normal advance is really a pretty controlled, keep my stance, keep pretty balanced, and I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to march them down. So go ahead and back up straight for me for a second, and try and maintain this range. By putting a pause in the middle of the advance, if I pause, he pauses. But I don't intend to stay paused, and so I'm going to catch him. It actually works if you are a fast person, you're going to do it at a run, and you're coming at him, he's trying to stay there, and you stop. And then, his pause happens after your pause, and you're in range all of a sudden. Same thing works getting away. He's trying to close with me. He wants to close with me, but he wants to hear like, I'm trying to get away. I stop, and then I get away. Because his pause comes after my pause, gives me that opportunity to stretch that range out. Anytime you can figure out what your opponent is analyzing, Kjartan is very unusual for this kingdom. Kjartan studies footwork. He has very good footwork. He studies footwork in a fight. He watches your feet. I don't know another fighter that does that. But he told me he does that. And he's very good. If you watch him fight, you'll see him cover his face with his shield. And he's completely blind. His shield's right here. He's looking right there at your feet, and he can tell by your lower leg and foot position what shots come, which baffles me. I couldn't do that, but he does it accurately.
I do it. I watch the feet.
I will, if I blind myself, I try not my vision goes down to the hips immediately, and I can gain a lot from that part of my opponent. Get a pretty good guess. Not as good as he does.
I think it's more of a round shield.
Yeah,
round shield thing.
Because you blind yourself a lot with the round, so you wouldn't be able to.
But he told me he's studying my feet, so I do weird things with my feet.
Oh, yeah.
He's like,
Start dancing.
really?
Like Chun and Remo Williams.
And then he's figured out, you know, I tend to like to come in and come over to a particular side as a tendency. Well, I know he's watching that. So the next fight we have, we come in, and he knows I'm coming this way, so all of a sudden I was over here. He's like, well, you don't do that. I know, that's why I did it.
That's why I did it.
Because I know he's paying too much attention. And so now I rotate. Every time I fight him, I change my fight intentionally. Because I can't afford, he's too good to afford to let him get a beat on the fight. So I can go through some specific things, some of the things that I do, some of the things that I use to try and throw a fighter off. One of the things that aids in a feint is, or rather than throwing a feint, is to throw a real shot that's a setup. I'll throw a shot to free somebody's defense, or to put their defense where I want it to be to open up the real shot. So if I want to hit him in the leg, and there's some mechanics involved in this because throwing a teardrop return, which is an old Bellatrix return, it's actually back with the hip. There's a rotation. The sword comes around there, and you got tension all the way from the ground. So you've got power coming right off that foot from the ground into the next shot. Makes for a very fast, very powerful return. The mechanics of it take a little bit of practice to get that mechanic into the shot. But it's fast. So I want his leg, but he's going to want to defend that leg. So I need to get his shield away from the leg. So I'm going to throw for his head, and then down to the leg. What I'm looking for is I want to get that defense right up there, and try and beat him down to his leg. So part of that speed, but a big part of it is get him to cover something. Or get him to cover over here in order to throw to that side. Sometimes I'll throw a shot that isn't intended to hit at all. Block his defense up there. Right over the head. Into the real shot. Again, it's got to be believable. If I do this, that's not very believable to a good fighter. That's not a threat to him. That's me flinging my sword around like a cowboy. So I need that shot to come right over his head. Into the real shot. Or right past the head into the real shot. Footwork is real critical with this. Most fighters, most of the time, you're going to come into a fight, and here I am, I'm right in front of you. And that's where most people want to go fight. I will usually close to there, but especially against lefties, but also against righties. Once I'm close to there, I'm going to real subtly change my position. Now I'm lined up with his sword side shoulder, and that changes my opening. I can also come in and change up to the other side shoulder. You go lefty. This works against, and it works just as well for lefties against righties, against somebody who's not paying attention. We line up, I'll be in the middle of the fight with him, and I'm still right here in the middle of the fight with him. I put my foot across the front of me, because what I'm going to do in the middle of the fight while we're fighting, I'm going to switch gears. What I've done is, I've taken away his wrap angle, and I've opened up mine. Usually won't go straight to there because I don't want him to see it. So I'm going to be here in front of him fighting him, and then I'm going to shift. Go ahead and stay in place just so I can demonstrate. So we'll be fighting pretty much squared up. In the middle of the fight, I'm going to shift, and then I'll shift my weight over it, and now I'm here. So if he throws a wrap, I have a pretty easy block. It's real hard for him to wrap. When I throw a wrap, I've got a lot of body. So it takes away one of the biggest tools for a lefty, or for a lefty. If I let him get there on me, it's really hard. Now look how far I've got to go to defend against this. I'm giving him my whole side once he gets there. So if you can do that in a fight without them noticing, and I can tell you, and this will never last, but Sharif doesn't notice when I do it to him. And Ed likes to jump that way too, so if you beat him to the punch, he doesn't really key on it as much. I tried to do that against Sven in the crown, and we lined up, and I took a step, and he took a step, and I took a step, and then there was the rope. It's like we just started laughing at each other, and let's go back to the middle. Nobody's going to fall for that today. But subtle changes. Most people, when they think about footwork, they think about the big, sweeping, kind of big footwork, which is useful and can be useful. But the small footwork, the little changes in angle that put you here or put you here, are much less noticeable to your opponent, much more likely to give you an opening, and much less risky. When I take a big step, you go back right-handed. When I take big steps, like when you're charging somebody, big motions will cause you to open something. I'm going to take a big old step here. I'm stepping out from my defense. I'm going to have to expose something to do that. There's a time and a place for that. But a little step there, I haven't given up anything. Same with range. I don't like to jump into range or charge into range. I like to control my range. I'll fight right out here at the edge of range, and I'm looking for him to get distracted in the middle of the fight. And I'm waiting for him to be distracted. That's when I'm going to change my range. If I change it right now, he's staring at me, he's just going to react to it. But if he's in the middle of swinging, and all of his brain is locked up on his offense, he's in the middle of swinging, he doesn't notice that I've stepped in until all of a sudden, I'm here and he doesn't want me here. Now he's panicked. Now he wants to get away. Now I'm really going to get over this. Let's see. Let me show you a couple of tricks. I'll show you my favorite tricks against people on the ground. Down there. Anybody that's watched much of my fighting has probably seen my favorite one. My favorite shot. My favorite thing to do: close right in, chop right across the forehead, come right up over him, and hit him in the ribs. So what I did was I threw a shot which did a couple of things. It froze his offense and it allowed me to close. So I'm stepping right into range with a shot that he's got to defend. Okay? Now I'm in range. Now I'm coming forward over this leg and up. And look where he did. He came right with me. And he gave me this nice big opening. So, okay. I blinded him while I was moving up. And it's just this psychological thing. The last thing he saw was a threat going that way, and he went with it.
Which is why I do this.
One of my more favorite things that you won't see as often, but it's just funny as hell it works. Same thing. I'll have that same close, deep step for the wrap. Right there. And when it really works well, you get them to really believe that wrap. You got to sell this wrap. So I'm going to come in, boom, full on wrapping for the kidney. He'll throw that sword right behind his head,
Shield back, and that belly is wide open.
just like that when I hit him in the belly. And I love hitting somebody in the belly with their sword and their shield behind their head. It's just fun. I'll show you a shot here, and this is mostly it's deceptive in that your opponent simply doesn't know where it went. This has kind of been a favorite of mine for about the last year or so. Throw a shot, and what I'm really doing is throwing a shot down on his head, and so the reaction is to this shot. What I'm really doing is I'm coming all the way across my body and throwing a shot here, right in front of my left shoulder.
What you've been throwing before.
Similar to that, yeah. And what I'm trying to hit is I'm trying to hit the back quarter of his helmet. But this isn't the shot I'm after. So I'm going to step in here, I'm going to throw that shot, and my real shot is going to come to his belly right there.
Or his face.
Or your drill.
I'm not leaning forward.
You know why? It's because he's skinny.
Just pull it back. If I throw that shot, they're going to be in high guard. They're probably going to block it. I'm putting my hand right up above their eyes. In most people's helmets, they lose sight of my hand. So they've lost sight of my hand, and the first time they get an idea what's happening is about there, when all of a sudden the blade comes into view. And the shot is really just a rock front blade, back blade, right there. And the trick is, the approach for the first shot, the angle I throw that at, determines the angle it's going to rebound back the other way. So it's a tick-tock thing that I'm doing over here in front of my left shoulder. Just a 1, 2. And so that first shot really sets it up. Good. If the elbow, most people would want themselves that first shield with that shot. Right over their head. Anybody who's got a nice little shade rim on their helmet, those are really great. Put your hand over that brim, they can't see a thing. Now, there is no trick that doesn't have an answer, and the answer to that is if you're on the ground, you have to figure out how to keep an eye on my offense. You have to get that set back, whatever it takes. Now, if he gets a little lean back and sword blocks my first shot instead of bringing that shield up, and he looks up then, now he can see my hand, see his turnover, and do something about it. There is no universal trick. Everything has an answer. It's just a matter of being one answer ahead of it. I throw the offside a lot. Most people see the offside. Most obvious thing for the offside is you set it up with a flat snap. So I'll throw flat snaps, flat snap, flat note. That's a shot I prefer not to throw out of guard, out of launch. That's a shot that I try to set people up with. I like to look and throw that. I need them to believe that nice reaction. There's a threat over there, going over there. And what I did while I was doing that, to make that threat, I get that shield open up a little bit, and I'll place my shield inside of his. So that when he figures it out, the shield can go through. And that's the only answer to that is sword blocking. It's the best answer anyway. Well, and the guys that want to shield block that, they throw that shield way over there. Block that, it's great. They just open up all right. Yeah, my block, anytime someone throws an offside at me, unless I'm just completely out of position, don't have the option, my block is always sword. And I don't static block. I don't come in here and absorb it. I actually strike the blade so it never gets that close to me. And one of the reasons I like that is if he throws the offside at me and I strike it, I drive his blade down out of position and set myself up. He was counting on his blade going someplace. I made it go somewhere else. Now he's got to adjust to that. And it was part of my plans. One thing, big thing about fakes. Fakes are great. Misguiding them is great. If you plan that before the fight starts, you will probably fail. You know the old saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And that works very much in fakes and very much in any kind of fighting. Anytime you go into a fight and you have in your mind, this person's going to do that, and then I'm going to do this and kill him. You know, occasionally that'll work. Most of the time it doesn't. Because you didn't give them the script and they do something else. And it just doesn't work out the way you want. Fakes, effective manipulation of your opponent has to happen in the course of the conversation of the fight. Throughout the fight, he's telling me things about his fight. He's trying to learn things about my fight. I'm telling him things that I want him to believe about my fight with my body motion. I want him to believe, I really want him to believe that I really want that sword side. And I'm going to do that, keep pressing that sword side until all of a sudden I go to the other side. So throughout the fight, there's a conversation going on. In the course of that conversation between you and your opponent, you need to be able to identify what's going to work against this guy. Fakes that work against one person don't work against another, and there is no, you can try them, but when you plan this big fake, try it, it doesn't work, and it erodes your own confidence if nothing else. The fake I love to throw against a passive fighter. He's the one that's just going to stand there, and and let me close at my leisure. And I know he's not going to charge me. If he charges me, this works out poorly for me. But he'll stand there, let me close with him, and let me swing down his leg. And it's a great one-shot kill. It's just embarrassing for him and just funny as hell for me. However, if I've judged him wrong, and I go to do that, and he steps right up into it, because where I turn that thing over, I'm just all kind of in an awkward place. Because it's really dependent, because really I'm throwing a quick turnover wrap nowhere into a flat snap. But all of a sudden, if I'm caught up here at the sword stop, it's just not good. Mostly I really like feints for the fun factor. It's most fun against intermediate fighters and for intermediate fighters. It works for them as well as against them. At the high-end feints, most of the feints are very small, very subtle, little things like
See why you can't plan it out.
no, I'm trying to think of one I specifically was looking at on video the other day. Yeah. Little things like the step. There's a video, if any of you looked at, I started using that analysis on a video of Callan Crest, and Sean is really good. And his feint is as simple as that. And all it is, we got a little bit of a shift in his defense. My sword has it. So I get that little bit of shift. Yeah. In the video when I was doing it, he had Jarton on the ground, and so Jarton's down here. Down on the ground. A little bit different.
Well, I didn't notice it.
Yeah,
I realized he had this.
and the only thing that Jarton does, Sean comes here, and Jarton didn't even move his shield. All he did was he moved his sword that far, back outside to react to a threat there, and slightly late behind the step, flat snap, wide open. And that was, that was not planned before the fight, but it was planned to have a second before it happened. It was a very deliberate fake to get him out of the way. And like I said, he's kind of a master of that. I actually started analyzing that video and taking little snippets out of it. And after the first couple, I decided I should not do anymore because Jarton was fighting in Crown the next week. And first off, I didn't want to expose a bunch of things like Jarton. Plus, I didn't want to get into his head with it. However, I watched Jarton in Crown fighting, I think it was Nick. And he had Nick on the ground, and I was behind him, and I watched him take that step and fire that shot in the Nick's head. Exactly. Yeah, I don't know who was watching that video, but there were a lot of hits on that video.
I hit it a lot. I watched it a lot.
Yeah, I watched him do that to Nick in Crown. I thought, oh, he watched. And and he's pretty sharp. I'm sure he figured out what happened to him when it happened to him, or at least at some point afterwards. But a lot of, especially at that end of a fight, a lot of that manipulation is very small. The shot that Sean, the feint that Sean used to get me to open my head for him, he has this, and I cannot throw this shot well to save my life. He has the shot that comes here and rotates beautifully into the leg, perpendicular, strikes nice every time I throw it. Nobody thinks it's right. Yeah, he does it, but he does this weird thing where it's actually almost a thrust down the blade to a rotation.
Rotate the head.
Front blade, and body mechanics to allow him to power that thing in. It's not, but anyway, he had destroyed my leg with it mercilessly. And he knew it, and I knew it, and I knew it really well, and I knew it started with that little thrust, so that little thrust caused that, and I just felt such an idiot. It's like, oh, you so set that up.
But he didn't hit you in the leg.
He didn't hit me in the leg.
That goes
And let me
to
tell
small
you,
victories.
Let me tell you, that day I went to that practice with him. I was getting ready for a Crown, and I went out there. It was a Saturday up in Las Vegas, and I had everything all figured out, and he was not going to get my leg. I had it figured out. I had his leg shots figured out. He was not going to. And apparently he knew that because he took my leg every fight all day long. And I spent that night studying video.
Over
And the next morning studying.
Was this the rollover versus flat snaps of blade?
There was that. There was the offside stuff. I don't even know what he was. Well, a big part of it was in analyzing the video and talking to him, because he's very upfront about this sort of stuff. I figured out that there was a hole in my defense. And honestly, 50% of the time right now, today, still that hole is in my defense. And it's in my shield. And he's able to. It's where the tip's at, because I get lazy and I'm here, or I'm here, and that allows, if you have the speed, he's hitting this one. If you have the speed that he does, he'll beat you the leg. And the answer to it was just in my brain, didn't make sense. The answer to it to me was, if I'm right here and he's staring at my leg, just a standing guard, if I'm right here, you can see my leg. If you can see my leg, you can hit my leg. Okay? The answer to it seemed wrong to me at the time because my shield's pretty close to my leg. It's not a big block. The answer to it was to take my shield farther from my leg. So I just took it out of his sight, and there's no longer a direct line to it.
Actually, if you notice when Sean fights, his point is out.
Yep.
It's like a goalie in
Yep.
soccer. He moved it out from the net to cut off the long range angle.
Yeah, there's an old fighting analogy, and it's not perfect. None of them are. But one of the things you can look at in fighting is, if you picture your opponent's hand as a light bulb, the shadow your shield casts is what is protected. So, if it's right here, it's not a very big shadow. If it's right here, it's a pretty big shadow. If it's right here, it's a really big shadow. Yeah, Sean has a beautiful little trick, and this is he throws a leg shot that he was hitting me with for a long time, and I was so frustrated because I knew I was blocking the shot and still getting hit with it. And for me, actually turn around and just throw a shot at my leg. For me, he was throwing a flat snap to my leg, and I was blocking it. And it's a very simple block for me. For me, it's just taking the point of my elbow, putting it on my hip, and it puts that point of my shield right there, and I'm covered. So I'm blocking this flat snap all day long, and I'm getting hit in the leg every time. Because he's not throwing a flat snap. His shot looks like a flat snap all the way to here. At that point, and this is a little bit advanced sword work, but if you play with swords enough, you know there's a balance point kind of between your arm and the sword. The sword easily wants to rotate on. Make fast pivots on, as opposed to trying to rotate at the hand where there's a lot of muscle and slowness going on. So if you have a good control of where that balance point is and how to rotate about it, you can come all the way out here, come around that balance point, and land with power on the back of the leg. So I was seeing a flat snap all the way to there, dismissing it as block, because I already threw the block, and getting hit right behind the knee, just above me. Perfect target, 2 inches above the knee. Exactly where you hit somebody. Farthest away you can get and still be legal. And it's thrown at speed. It looks, and if you try and explain this to somebody without a pill, it makes no sense. But it looks like that, and it hits with power. But my basket hilt has actually come all the way in front of me, right between me and my opponent, and I make that rotation on that and rip the tip of the sword into the top with the sword. I can come right here, you get a fair amount of power without any momentum. You add in momentum to it, it lands real hard. It also works nicely against full weapons. I'm not really going to swing this stuff. But most of the time, they throw a block for a flat snap right there. I throw the flat snap. And that pivot point works out to be right for the block. It's really nice against blades. Because I'll usually take that block in really close to their head. Right there. Because they're not making a block for a wrap. It takes some practice on the pel to get the mechanics of that, so it's a fake, it's a way of manipulating your opponent, but it's a mechanically complicated one for a new fighter. So don't be surprised if it's a little frustrating.
It also helps if you have a heavy basket hilt. So the balance point.
It does change with the balance point of your blade, although he uses a pretty light sword and I use a really heavy sword. and it works for both of us. But you do have to learn how to throw the mechanics to get the feel for that. And it's a weird thing because what really happens is your hand goes here, and then your hand actually goes through an arc like this, making a U with your hand around the balance point of your sword in order to make you come in. And so it's not a real straightforward thing to get from here to there. Because if you just try and force it around the wrist like most people want to throw a wrap, you'll have no power. It'll be clumsy. You've got to come around that. But if you can find somebody that knows how to throw it or get some time with me, I'll be happy to work with you. I can tell on it. It's a nice shot. It will take a while to practice that to make it work. A bunch of time trying to learn a new way to throw for the offside, we were talking about earlier. It was very alien to me. And having done the same shot with different mechanics for over 3 years, my body wouldn't let me do it. And when I literally I could not do it with a sword in my hand. I could take the sword out of my hand, and I could do it. Put a sword in my hand, and I'd go the wrong way.
Muscle memory.
Yep. Yeah, the muscle memory was so ingrained. It was so frustrating that I couldn't make that work. And I tried it. And I got, well, I can make it work with less concentrating enough. Not really well. Just because I had enough concentration to do it. But if it was a reaction, I went back to my old mechanics. And then, about 3 months later, I threw it in the middle of a fight without even thinking about it. And it just happened. And then after that, it started clicking. And now, it is my perfect throwing shot.
That was your hip rotation.
Yeah, that's reversing that hip rotation for the offside shot.
Yeah.
And I-
Hip back instead of forward.
It was forward instead of back, yeah.
It's this way.
And I think that's part of the key to how Sean lands that damn leg shot. I have to get some slow motion video trying to get it out. Speaking it, I should kill it. But I can't. However, Yarden's leg shot works really nice, which is another thing. And he does it much better than I do. But Yarden, if he wants that leg, he's going to throw a flat snap at it. Usually with a step. What he's doing is he's going to throw, for him, right through where this hip is with that leg. So he's going to snap and step here and rotate his hip out of the way in order to return to there. And then he gets that pop right there. He's really good at it. He will draw your defense here, your hip forward, and right into that leg. And all he's looking for is, as he throws this shot, he's looking for you to rotate your hip and your body into that shot. That's a real shot. He comes right back there. He does it beautifully. I don't do it as pretty as he does, but it works. Just selling that, getting that defense into this corner, throwing to that corner. And he's just, basically he's throwing, a lot of times, at least for me, I'll throw this flat. Because I'll throw that flat because really what I'm looking for is that. And so I'm setting up my blade angle here, even though I'm throwing flat to the side of his head. I'm setting myself up for that shot. And it would probably be a little less deceptive if we fought with real swords, and you were good enough to actually pay attention to the fact that it was a flat-headed fork instead of an edge. But with rattan work, with a real sword, you can still do it. There's just more of a transition involved in the hand. It just came out of left field. It never occurred to me. It never entered into my brain. And then one day I was watching. Well, I had been to Sean's class where Sean was teaching that, and the way he taught it, and this is unusual. He was very clear at explaining things, but the way he was explaining it never worked in my brain. And I tried it, and like, no, it just doesn't work. That's backwards. And then once, maybe a year later, I was watching a video, a YouTube video of Luther talking, explaining sword mechanics, and Luther was doing the same thing. And then a couple of months after that, I ran into Branos, and Branos was throwing that shot. And those are three of the top-end fighters in the club. And I thought, wow, if these three guys are doing that, and I'm not, I'm probably missing out on something. rotating here, they're actually rotating that hip forward as they're going to the offside. Which seems, it's still in my brain, explaining it like that seems like that won't work. But if you explain it differently, if you picture throwing a punch, that's the mechanics of throwing a punch. So really what I'm doing is I'm throwing a punch, which is why I had to sword in my hand when I was trying to figure that out. I do that all day long. It doesn't work. Take the sword out of my hand, I can throw a punch. That works fine. So I would sit here at the Pell, throwing a punch off into space, take the sword in my hand, and then throw the shot. What it allows a very linear, straight line application of power from the ground to push up. Instead of swinging the sword through an arc through a helmet, I'm actually driving the sword directly from the front straight to the back of the helmet. It's very fast. For me, it's targeted directly at the person's right eyeball with the tip of the sword. You can do it deeper, but yeah, for me, what I'm looking for that guard position right there. Okay, I'm looking at this gap, and I want to drive right there. And a straight punch, I'm going to punch straight back to the back.
But
of
it's
the helmet.
also a response line. If your opponent throwing any shot, any of his onsides,
I'm fairly well protected, but really what I'm looking for.
You can counter with it very well. But on snipe, it's just that round shield, and anybody who goes forward hard has this gap right here.
Yep, that little gap. In fact, if you keep that hand low, you're better protected. You raise your hand a little bit.
If the hand goes up,
Your hand goes up. No, that's just wide open. Now, if your hand's low, now I have to change my angle. If your hand's high, where most people are, where they're up here, okay, that's a nice big open. And I throw this. I don't throw this from up here. If you throw this from up here, I can do it. I have enough upper body strength that I can frequently get a kill from there. It's very hard. So that's why my guard is shifted back to here, because I like the shot enough that I've changed my guard for it. Because from here, it's a viable danger, and I can hit that very quickly, and I can put enough power into it, hip, body, everything, all the way from the ground through the helmet. It is right now my favorite shot. And I threw that from the ground, dead, in the semifinals from the ground. Now, if you throw it, a lot of people initially doing it, people tend to want to throw more with the sweet spot of their sword. If you throw this with the sweet spot of your sword, it still works fine, but you're throwing into a lot of junk. If the sword comes up there, it's very easy to block. It's got this guard, now my direct line is open, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise my hand higher, so I stay in that guard. So if I throw here, he's got it covered. I'm going to raise my hand and drop my hip while throwing it. So I've adjusted my angle to his defense. There's still a slot there. All I have to do is identify the angle and punch through it. But same thing. If I throw that out here with the deep part into the sweet spot of the sword, it makes it very easy to block. For me, it's very much a tip shot. I throw a lot of shots where I utilize the tip of my sword a lot. This one hasn't been used for very long, and the tip of it's already mushy right here because I use the tip of my sword a lot. The real reason, people think I hate thrusting, which I just think it's not great for tournament for other reasons. But the real reason I don't have a thrusting tip on my sword is I don't want a piece of foam padding right there. When I dig that corner into somebody's chest, I don't feel it. And when you dig a piece of foam into somebody's chest, right there, they don't feel it. If I dig that tip in, they'll feel it. And I love the slot shot. It's one of my favorite shots. Up in guard, I throw a slot shot that comes over here, over in front of my left hip. The actual approach angle is way over here. It's not the down the center slot shot you usually see. It's over there. So if I get somebody that holds their shield out here a little bit, it's very easily inside the shield. It's a great shot for killing Dukion. Get that kind of A-frame guard over there, and you come right inside of it, into the nipple.
It's not bad on Duke Patrick either.
Only one person ever hits me with it. And I have no armor there.
just saying. Do you think it's wise? Do you think it's wise to, if you're wearing the full metal
body armor, and you're not sitting in shots, and you get belt, and you get better to wear lamellar, so you could tune yourself up to.
Yeah, I think it's something we run into. Whatever armor you're going to wear, you've got to be able to calibrate yourself. So if you're wearing a hard steel suit, that's fine. But it's your responsibility to calibrate yourself to it. Your opponent shouldn't have to change the shot because he's hitting somebody in plate or somebody in chain, because we are not playing with armor as worn. Because if we're going to play armor as worn, we'll all put plate on, none of the shots will count. Whatever armor you're going to wear, you've got to be able to calibrate yourself. So if you're wearing a hard steel suit, that's fine. But it's your responsibility to calibrate yourself to it. Your opponent shouldn't have to change the shot because he's hitting somebody in plate or somebody in chain, because we are not playing with armor as worn. Because if we're going to play armor as worn, we'll all put plate on, none of the shots will count. And, well, and again, this is a sport.
Then we get to
the reality of what we're doing, and you'll get different philosophies on this. The reality is we're recreating medieval combat or medieval tournaments. Medieval tournaments weren't to kill people. The other reason I don't use a thrusting tip, tournaments weren't to kill people. If you thrust a sword through somebody's eye, they're going to probably die.
Don't get ransom.
So generally in tournaments, thrusting was mostly discouraged because you don't want to kill all your friends you need to fight next to you in the war next week. But really, I like having that hard tip. And all of my war weapons always have that. But what we're really doing in recreating this medieval sport in a modern sport is we're effectively playing counted blows. We have to be playing counted blows to one, with limbs counting as half. But we are playing a sport. Nobody gets their leg chopped off and continues to fight. We're simply saying you were good enough to hit this target that we've artificially restricted to above the knee. Therefore, as a reward for that, I'm not going to use it. Because if you really chop my leg off, I'm done. I'm trying to live.
What a fuss!
It's just a flesh wound.
There's a medieval martial arts group, been around for decades. It's always been very critical of the SCA because of our inaccuracies while learning their own. But somebody in the group actually put together a pretty interesting paper years ago, inspired by the fact that we act out leg wounds, and basically researched every documentable case of a leg injury that they could find, mostly from Norse sagas and period references. And basically, leg blows in real combat either have no effect on the combat and the guy just keeps going, or they're fatal, with pretty much nothing in between. If it cut in, his adrenaline's pumping, and he's cut the muscle, and the guy's just going to keep fighting because he's fighting for his life, or it went so deep that he can't do that, and he's going to bleed out shortly, and he's not going to keep fighting. So what we do is just acting out. It's awarding your opponent for the skill of hitting you in a restricted target area that we don't allow below the knee. On the battlefield in medieval warfare, primary target. Also the heaviest armored part you usually see. You go all the way back to ancients. What do you see them armor? Big heavy helmets, big heavy greaves. Big shield in the middle. Swing at the greaves all day long. Put your head right down there so I can chop at it. Bend over and swing for my legs. I got lots of armor there, and I'm perfectly happy raining shots down on you. I mean, one of the other very artificial things we do, what number one primary target in the SCA, what are we all swinging at? Hit people in the helmet. We all have nice big steel helmets on. They all had nice big steel helmets on. The one place you're not going to hurt anybody is in the head. If you're really trying to hurt somebody, you want to hit them where the armor isn't. We only do that to people we don't like. There have been occasions where I may have targeted some gap in armor. For what reason?
Hit me right here 4 times.
The guys that don't want to take the shot that landed on the armor will usually take the shot that doesn't. Just saying.
When they talk about rhino hide, how's that handled? Too much.
I do a whole class on calibration, which is a really, really in-depth, interesting discussion, because defining it is difficult. Defining how hard is a good shot. We have this old thing in the SCA, been around for 40 years. We're all considered to be wearing chainmail and leather armor. As a good shot is a shot will defeat chainmail. Well, the reality is you're probably not going to defeat chainmail short of stabbing it. And I've seen some pretty cool tests where they tried.
Did turn out so good.
You might break the link or two, but so we have kind of an artificial. We have decided this is a good shot, and that makes problems because we don't all. You have to feel it and learn it,
and
so
varies widely wherever you go.
Yeah, it varies widely regionally. It has varied widely right here. And let me tell you, I've been doing this for a long time in this kingdom. We were a bunch of thugs in the early days. I was one of them. And then there was a time period where in Central Caidis, directly because some people wanted it to be that way, the calibration was reduced because that was the game they wanted to play, which is all fine. Yeah.
It went
It went pretty light. Now, that happened right after my daughter was born. And I was busy for a while, and I didn't really play a lot. I came to wars.
I stopped.
So, she gets bigger and older, and I got some more time, and I come back out, and I'm down there in Calafia, and we still got some thugs down there. Nobody told me anything had changed. So I'm just having a good old time, and I come up to Los Angeles to a tournament. And I fought a few people. I didn't think a whole lot about it. I mean, I was at this point. This was the point in time where I decided to get serious about fighting. I've been well over 20 years in the SCA and never really been serious about training fighting. This was it. My daughter was old enough. I'm going to become a training fighter. And so I came up with an agenda. I was there to prove something. I was there coming back into this sport, and I was going to get somewhere. And I was at a pot of arms, and I was fighting the king at the time, who was Rorik. And Rorik was a pretty rough and tumble guy. There was no problem at all with that. We were having a great old time. We were doing counter blows to 5. And I was pretty thrilled because I got 3 blows on the king before he got 5 on me. And I was fighting for all I was worth. And then I went out and I fought another knight who I had known for a couple of decades. And I thought he was a pretty, high-end kind of tourney fighter guy. And I went from fighting the king to fighting this guy. And when I was up 3-0 on him, I thought, maybe I should back off. But I didn't. And as it happened, there was night council apparently the next week. And some guys came down and talked to me about how I was too intense. That started, there were some issues in those years. I literally, in order to meet the current calibration, I had to change my fight. Because they weren't going to change the calibration to suit me. It didn't take long. Reputations are very fast to generate in this club and very slow to get rid of. Didn't take long. Patrick's a rhino hide. Patrick's a thug. Patrick hits too hard. So I literally, if that sword passed within half an inch of my helmet, I was going to fall down. And I stopped. I threw away all the technique that I had learned and threw shots with just my arm, quit throwing any body into it. That worked fine for a while. I figured out how to hit hard with just my arm. Over time, that calibration came back. Over time, the people that thought I was too much of a thug and beating on them got over it. But so what is perceived as a rhino hide varies a lot depending on who you are, where you are, what you're doing. And we see a huge, even within the people here, we have newer fighters here. You go out to fighter practice and you fight a newer fighter, and you can hit him anytime you want, and you don't want to break him. You want him to stay here, you want to keep playing. So what happens is, you don't even think about it, you drop your power in half. Because you want to give them a chance to learn, you don't want to throw full speed, you want them to see the shot so they can figure out how to block it. But you don't ever communicate that way. So what you're doing is you're teaching them a calibration that's wrong. You're teaching them that's a good shot. And then they get out there in a tournament, someone rips their head off with a shot twice as hard as they've ever been hit with because you didn't tell them you were training them and not fighting them. No. And then we get, the other thing that happens, we get out in the tournament, your adrenaline gets up, you get sensory overload, especially depending on how much experience you have. You get so hyped up that you're not fully aware of what's happening around you. Your brain is processing all the information it can. You're trying to figure out how to swing this sword, how to put this shield in the right place. Somewhere out there there's an opponent. Your armor doesn't feel right. It doesn't fit. It's pinching you over here. And then the fight's over and somebody's talking to you because you weren't taking any shots. And more often than not, that is the cause of rhino hiding in the SCA. It's not the guy that's, I'm going to cheat until I win. It's the guy that just didn't register what just happened. Or the guy that's put on so much armor that he doesn't feel anything and hasn't gained the experience to understand his own armor. Nothing wrong with wearing lots of armor. It's your responsibility to calibrate in that armor. So yeah, if you've got Milanese plate on, that's fine. You're going to have to figure out how to make that work. And for a lot of people doing really heavy stuff, that amounts to learning what it sounds like when you get hit right. And it can be faulty. Jim made a new helmet for himself. The thing weighed, I don't know, 45 pounds.
11 gauge stainless.
Holy crap. And so he came out to fight, and he came out and told everybody, this is a new helmet, it's really heavy, I'm not going to feel anything. If I miss something, please tell me. And he was taking things that hit his helmet because they hit his helmet, because he couldn't tell whether they were good or not. He was having to rely on his opponents to tell him, because he made it for a different sport where they're just going to hack at you with a 6-foot axe.
Is it really 45 pounds?
No.
No.
It's
But
only like 10.
Is it? How much is it?
Only
10.
10? I would have guessed it heavier than that.
Yeah.
I did that when I
But it's
switched
tough.
helmets too. I was like, this is totally different metal and stuff like that. And I said, just let me know.
Yeah, it feels different, it sounds different. You know, any part of your armor. I mean, back when I was the rhino hiding thug, one of the other things I did right away is I had big, heavy steel legs. I got rid of them when I went to leather legs. It hurt, but I took every shot. I didn't have to guess whether someone hit me or not. So it's, it's partially a matter of how much pain you're willing to deal with in order to. And I don't wear a lot of armor now because for the time being, I'm reasonably well at blocking, so I don't get hit too often, so I don't mind. At some point, I'll get older and slower and I'll put some more armor because I'm not smart enough to quit.
That's going, like he was talking about the feints. So on the skill level we have here, you have to remember where he went back to. So like you've been fighting a few years, right? Next tournament, try this. Next tournament, it works. Remember he was talking, little feints work on better fighters, big feints work on not so better fighters. It's true, and to prove it, the next time you go into a tourney and you fight a knight, when you get set up, cock your sword.
Oh,
Let's
no,
go like
back
this.
up right
See what I mean? That ain't even a feint. I just go like this, and the knight goes.
Yep,
Whoa, wait a
exactly.
second. Whoa.
Hey, what's going on
The
here?
new fighter, you're gonna go like this, and they're gonna go. You know what I mean?
Yep,
And the new fighter, if you go, because Patrick said that shit don't work, the new fighter's gonna go. It works. So you have to think when you're coming up through the ranks. Think just like us, but it's backwards. You go fight the knight. I don't need to do the big step.
What's he gonna react?
When I fight the knight, I can go, and the knight's going, oh, hey,
I mean,
hey,
The fighter that really knows me and sees me do that, oh, they change their position.
Yeah, at that point you go.
All right, I just changed my options for where this sword is going. The new fighter who sees me do that didn't see me do that.
Yeah, they just.
And I just put that line, that blade right on line so I can punch him in the eye.
It's a lot of thought when you think feints and fakes and what am I going to do. So you have to play with it. And at practice, it doesn't work so much because everybody's kind of at practice. You know what I mean? But when you get somebody in a tournament, it's still practice.
Or you want to practice. I mean, one of the important things, one of the things we miss a lot of practice, when you go to practice with people, there's practice where you're practicing your technique. You're working the new shot. You're working the defense, whatever. You communicate with your opponents what you're doing. But then take the time to say to your opponent, let's fight. This is tournament, not holding back.
tournament practice.
Because if the only time you ever do that is when you get to the tournament, then you've never practiced it. And it's a whole different world when you make that transition from I'm working on these skills to I'm in a fight. And when you're in a fight, you don't work on your skills. Don't try your new thing because it's cool. Clear your mind and fight your fight. Fight the fight you have today, not the fight you wish you had today. If you're fighting the fight you wish you had, you're probably going to lose.
If you got two fighters standing there, one is experienced and cocky, puts his shield down and is down like that and goes, come on.
Yeah, I've done that. Don't ever do that. Old story, but years ago, before I was knighted, I came out to fight this girl. And I thought, man, I should let her throw some shots. It was cool, man. Long before she was knighted, too. And I walked out there and I was being all cocky. Yeah, I'm just going to thump right in the middle of the chest. I never gave her an inch. Ever after that.
Totally different fight the next
Just
time.
run on the field, like you're there, and he's there, and you just drop your shield and sword and say,
Well, and I'll do that to mess with people. Again, that's line with somebody.
You say, when are you going to move? What do you do? What does this person do?
I'll walk out, you know, and we're getting ready for a fight.
I don't back up. If my opponent wants to drop his shield, regardless of how skilled they are, I don't care how many cornets they've got on.
Most of the time, he's going to be out of range when he drops his shield.
But no.
You're out there.
The marshal,
Oh, yeah.
and we give our salute, and okay, and I'll just. Okay, can I be any more cocky? And it's like, yeah, whatever. You know, scare me. And then I'm not going to walk all the way in like that, but I want him to think.
Because from right here, a half step and I can hit it.
Yeah.
That's all I need, and I can hit it.
Now,
So like, if you stand right there,
You don't.
If he's
don't move,
You can hit him.
put your
You
shield
get
down,
hit.
put your shield down.
yeah, if he's standing there,
And say, come on, hit me. Come on, hit me. What do you do?
and you know, and I'm messing with
You
him.
oblige him.
This is an
What do
invitation.
you do?
This is an invitation to hit me.
what he wants me to do is throw so he can try to counter shot. And I know that that's what he wants me to do.
And I want him over
So what-
confident.
so-
And he knows too well I wouldn't do this to him.
So what I would say is, okay, and as soon as I get to here, I'm going to throw a whole lot of shots. And the main thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to occupy his sword so he can't do anything bad.
Now, if I'm doing this to somebody, I'm trying to look completely relaxed, like nothing they do can possibly bother me.
You're being cocky out there.
Yep. Now, what's going on in my head is something entirely different, because I know I'm lying. So what I'm
How good
doing
is your
in
poker
my head is I'm gauging range. I know when he's going to cross that range. I know what he's got to do. And so when he crosses that range, my demeanor is going to change. Unless I really have figured out he's really not as good as the guy thinks he is, and he's going to close that range, and I really want to mess with him, and I let him swing. He swings for my teeth, and I just... And that's really what somebody said.
When you
just
come
lean
off
back
on
and
the
let
side to
the
make
shot
him turn somewhere.
And ironically, I just talked about a technique this morning where I throw that shot on purpose. He's just out of reach. Just out of reach. He's no longer out of reach.
That's my leg shot.
Because my shoulder, the biometrics of your shoulder, if you throw a horizontal low, your arm is X far. When you throw at a downward angle,
When you're
you get more
practicing,
reach because your shoulder rolls forward. The muscles allow it to roll forward, so you can do that.
when you're practicing at your pel, which I very much advocate, don't stand in front of your pel swinging blows. Move in and out. You need to know where the end of your sword is. You need to know what you can reach and what you can't. For it to be a fake shot, I have to time that to know exactly where my tip is. I've got to pass close enough to him that he bites before it's done on his head. So you've got to learn that distance and how to feel that distance in motion, especially like that shot. That's very much I'm out of range, I'm in range. But
I
the
feel
first
that shot too, by the way.
Yeah, the first shot has to. If the first shot doesn't miss, or if the guy surprises you and steps into it, you're all of a sudden you went from being sneaky to trying to get the hell out and save your life.
Or you could just be real patient and wait for him to
To
So-
answer your question earlier, though, the calibration thing, if we have somebody who's really just not taking shots, and we have a huge problem in the club with how we deal with that, more so even than it actually happens. Because I'll tell you the typical thing, and this happens probably at every tournament you go to. one of the things I do in the calibration classes, we've gone out and we'll take 2 fighters and 2 marshals and have them fight a few fights with the instruction that just fight your fight and then we'll discuss it. When we discuss it, everybody has to say what they really think. We're not saving anybody's feelings. If you think it was good, say it was good. If you think it was bad, say it was bad. And so we ask each fighter and each marshal. And about 30% of the time on a given fight, there's a disagreement between those 3 opinions. And that means when we're out there in a tournament, a third of the fights out there's some disagreement. Somebody in that fight who didn't speak up afterwards has a different opinion about what happened than somebody else in that fight. Regardless of who's right. But we fight, fight's over.
Are you satisfied?
Yeah. So I walk off, I go back, I just won the fight, that's cool. He goes over to his camp and crumple. Rhino High doesn't take anything jerk in his camp. Nobody talks about my camp. And we go on about it. And that's how we handle it. I mean, that is generally the reality. Because people are reluctant to speak up if they think there's a problem.
It is against human nature to be confrontational most of the time.
Yeah.
Well, you feel pressure to keep your mouth shut.
To work on.
Yeah, because you don't want to be like, I don't want to call that guy out because I think he's cheating. So you tend to, it's cool, whatever. Yeah, okay.
Well, you know, and then there's social things like, you know, oh, he's a Duke. I don't want to say he's not taking his shots.
It's all fun anyway.
Dukes can miss shots as well as anybody.
It's all about fun.
It is, but get serious about it. It's a competition like any other sport.
We just had an experience where somebody had all brand new armor on, not cheap. And by the time he was done, he got sword all over his brand new armor, and he didn't feel nothing.
And sometimes that's the problem. But the thing is, if nobody tells him, if nobody tells him, nobody says anything, as far as he knows, he didn't miss anything. He's fine. You didn't tell him.
That's the biggest problem at practice. Somebody will hit somebody and they'll go, that was kind of light, but I'll take it. No. It was not
Kind of light.
It was fine. Fight again. You
Yeah.
don't want them to leave with that memory.
And that's the problem. If we're not upfront about what is good calibration, and it's an ongoing flexible thing, but if we don't actually discuss it, it leads to people being pissed off and unhappy.
I just wonder how discussed.
And it's a touchy thing too, because the marshals, we do not have discriminate marshaling. They don't decide who dies, and the quality and the skill of marshals varies broadly. Because it's volunteers. You can get on the marshal so we can play. So
We all have our chinks, but it's same.
it's a tough question. And then, geez, you go someplace else. I went out to another kingdom to do a fighter practice, and I was talking to a Duke out there. And I said, hey, getting armored up, and I was busy. I was there for business. I said, well, what's calibration like? And he says, oh, I was out in Caid for a little while, and our calibration's about the same. Okay, sounds good.
What border Caid?
And I closed with him once, and he decided that wasn't a good thing to let happen. Because I took all kinds of weird angles that he didn't like. So he starts running away from me. And he's faster going backwards than I am. Faster going backwards. And all the time he's backing up. And I'm right here chasing after him. So he hits me like 6 times in the forearm. I didn't react. I didn't block. I didn't hit my arm. In my brain, and then I stopped. I'm like, you keep doing that. Is that a good shot here? It's like, well, yeah, kind of. Hey, got it. I'm visiting. Their calibration is the right calibration. I try to make sure because I get to other kingdoms periodically, I try to make sure to find out what that is and to find out the local conventions, because conventions across the STA vary hugely. Things that we do here, they don't do. There are some kingdoms where they do things that if they did here would instantly piss everybody off. And it occasionally
In
happens.
certain kingdoms, if you walk out with a sword built like this, they would ask you to have a fight.
Absolutely.
They would say no. There's absolutely no
And
way.
right after,
do this.
and right after you did, they'd be calling a marshal's court. In Anstiora, fighting some Anstiora fighters, guy legs me, and I drop to the ground, and he looks at me, and my lord, would you care to yield? And in my head, I'm like, how the hell would I do that? Okay, so the next thing the guy does is he comes in, and he's got a shield that's 4 foot tall and 2 feet wide. And he comes in, I'm on the ground, he comes in,
How's your attorney shield?
and yeah, it's nasty or attorney shield, seriously, it's not a joke. He comes in, and he crams that shield, I'm on my knees, he crams that shield into my elbow and presses my arm back here behind my back. Back here like this, and he comes in, and he puts his elbow down on top of my shield and presses it to my head. And he's taller than this, so instead of having his chest in my face, I had his cup in my face.
Oh, nice. I'm not going there.
And about that time, I'm sitting here like this, all pressed back, pressed down, looking at this guy's cup, thinking, wow, I guess maybe this is why I wanted to yield.
Even if you can, Landy.
Now, on the other hand, I was fighting Duke Drake. This was in Anstior. He's the guy who was back pedal faster than Pitt's super light. Turns out he had been in Caid in the 90s in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Fighting against the lighter hitting of our brethren. And so, you know, he felt safe. Killed the whole herd. Killed the whole mafia. But,
Not me.
last time I was out there fighting him, I legged him and I realized, well, he's used to these guys coming in and mugging him. Well, I don't do that. That's really rude out here. If you do that to somebody here,
Yeah, we'll call him up. What are you doing, man?
But I realized, you know, they're used to, if you're down there on your knees, the guy's going to come in and put this 2 foot by 4 foot shield right here and press your arm back. So they never have to learn to defend it. So he never saw it coming when it came across his ribs. They did. And
No, they welled up pretty fast.
and there was applause and cheering. And people that came right up to me and said, can I leg him for you so we can see that again? But conventions do, if you guys ever get the chance to travel, you go to foreign wars. Gulf Wars is a prime example where we have one of, if not the hardest hitting kingdoms in the SCA is Atlantia. And they're right up the coast from Meridies. It is the lightest hitting kingdom in the SCA. And they all join together on the battlefield. And the Atlanteans swing and the Meridians squeal. And then they call Marshall's Court. Because those two cultures just don't mix well together.
Rambo moved to his man. He don't wear no body on it. He goes, first practice, I roll out, throw my fingers on the bikini belt, and they're all going, well, fine. Well, how'd that work out for you? He goes, I don't know, the first piece of rattan like caved in my right side and poked out the other.
Well, that's why in the southern kingdoms, they tend to not wear a lot of body armor, and that's why they fight with those big giant shields, because it's 10,000% humidity and
although if you go farther south into Trimaris down in Florida, the calibration comes back up, not to Atlantean standards. But so it is. Anytime you get out there, you really have to figure out what the local calibration is. Well, hopefully before you piss people off. You know, Middle Kingdom's a little lighter. Pretty much at this point in time, calibration from the Mexican border to the Canadian border on the west coast is pretty consistent. You get little regional differences, but I don't really see a lot of difference. I go up and fight non-tier periodically and have a great time down there. The West is all hit pretty solid. Their calibration has come down a touch since the days.
Some legends never die, they just call light.
I won't name any of those legends.
Wipe the blood away.
The ego.
So,
Hey, I have seen
It's
a
a
fighter
different game now.
in this kingdom,
Different game.
in a tournament, who, honest to God, said, the shot wasn't good, but I can't see through the blood in my eyes, so I'm going to have to heal.
Tamiki.
Well, and he in fact was actually kicked out of the kingdom not long after that. He was pretty notorious. But
So they saved his life.
probably. Well, although it was detrimental to mine because I had a friend who made a sword specifically to hit him. He got a piece of 3-inch rattan, and he had it spiral wrapped with red, or yellow and black. And he brought it out to a tournament, and this guy's been thrown out of Kingdom, and he wanted to use his sword. So we're fighting a tournament. I ended up using it, and I was pretty young at the time, and I was fighting in half-inch closed cell foam under suede for my thigh armor. And he hit me in the leg, and I didn't drop because I was acknowledging the shot. I dropped because I couldn't stand after that, because it bruised all the way to the bone. And then Sir Trigby came rushing out there and read him the riot act, took the sword away from him, told him he was never allowed to use it again. So he went and grabbed another sword, and I had a breastplate that had pressed down the front. He came up, I was on my knees, he came over and pressed me back. So I was pressed back like that, and he threw a thrust right here. Didn't hit the cup. Stopped right here inside my breastplate. Inside. Right at the bottom of the breastplate, all the way up to the shots. Which I died to. I thought about it later. It's like, that wasn't a killing shot, really.
No, but think about it. In real period, if a sword got there, it would have cut your insides out anyway. So.
Well, either that or I sat up and he wouldn't have had a sword.
Surprise.
Because it didn't hit me, it just came in between me and my breastplate. So if anybody wants, I'm happy to show them any of the stuff that we're working on, some of my weird sword technique stuff.
What's the best way? You were saying practice at the pedal by moving or stepping forward, knowing your range. Any advice on that?
I like to do, I mean, anytime there's a sword in my hand, I'm kind of goofing around with it because you want to know where the end of the sword is. If you do it enough, you can change sword length and you still feel it. You can just tell by the feel of the sword, you know where the end of the sword is. But you need to know what your range is. And when I'm practicing, I don't do combinations anymore. I was taught with combinations. I don't really teach them. Because to me, they're good for learning how to transition from one shot to another. Beyond that, they don't work in combat. Because that's that I have a plan and hopefully my opponent knows the plan and cooperates with it. So when I practice at the Pell, I tend to pretty much freeform, just work from shot to shot. And I try to vary my range and move around the Pell because I'm going to do that in a fight. One of the things I do a lot is I like to throw shots when I'm leaving. And that's very much a timing thing because I want to hit with the end of the sword, ideally at the point where they've dropped their guard. I'm going away, I'm not a threat. And you hit him in the eyes. So, but if you don't know the range, you can't back up and hit him with the tip of the sword in the eyes. So you want to know that, you want to know where you can hit from. You should be able to hit all the way from there to here and be able to effectively throw blows. So if you always stand at B range and practice your B range shots, you get good at them as long as your opponent's cooperative and wants to stand there. But if you can't throw a shot with your opponent right here, you're going to be in trouble sooner or later. You got to be able to figure out how to get those shots in when you can't put your sword in here anymore. The guy's right in front of your face. You got to find the stuff that's going to work. Short stick. The other thing I like to do, and this is a drill we do, one of the few drills we really regularly do on the Pell, especially with newer people, is put two people on the Pell, stand opposite me. The objective of this is just to continually throw blows, and I'm going to try and stay directly opposite him on the Pell. And so you pick one person that's going to lead, and the objective is not for one person to catch the other. The objective is simply for them to stay opposite each other and work both directions. So I'll lead, and you just stay opposite me. And I'm going to work on throwing stuff. I'm going to throw continually, but I'm going to change it. One of the things that I'm working on while doing this is I want to be able to throw shots while advancing. Putting somebody on the other side of the Pell and doing that gives you something to react to, so that your footwork isn't just I'm wandering around the Pell. You're actually having to pay attention to your opponent. And you need to get that smooth. I had a squire now at night, but the first time I tried doing that with him, he looked like Frankenstein walking around the Pell. He had no idea how to move his feet. literally comical. It's like, you're just, and that was, we had to modify his shoes. He was flat-footed, standing on his heels, and trying to move around with me. Like, now get on the balls of your feet. Learn how to make
It's
the
those
transition.
flip-flops.
Be able to spin.
Those flip-flops he used to wear all the time.
Flip-flop pump practices.
Well, when he was doing the Frankenstein thing, though, it was in
No,
combat boots
but
back
that's
then.
what he always wore his footwear
Now,
then.
yeah.
I'm certain that's why.
Nobody else around. And so he said,